Come on out to Mississauga, it's the greatest place around. Where on a quiet evening you can watch the sun go down. And if you should need a friend, there are plenty to be found. That's why everybody loves that good old Mississauga.
Hello, and thank you for joining us here on Ask a Historian. I'm Matthew Wilkinson, historian with Heritage Mississauga. Please send in your questions to history@heritagemississauga.org as we explore the fascinating stories of the City of Mississauga together. Like, subscribe, and follow us and stay up to date on all the heritage happenings with Heritage Mississauga. As part of this program, we will be exploring memories, moments, and milestones from the past 50 years with past and present civic leaders and citizens as part of the City of Mississauga's 50th anniversary. On this week's episode, we're excited to be joined by former City of Mississauga Ward 9 Councillor Pat Saito as we explore her personal perspectives of moments and milestones for the City of Mississauga's 50th anniversary. Well, thank you, Pat, for joining us on this program and wandering down memory lane with us here with moments and milestones in the city. I know you got a lot, but let's start with maybe an easy intro, and that is, what are your connections to the City of Mississauga, and when did it become home to you?
Well, it actually became home to me in 1972.
Okay.
Ron and I were married in 1970, and we lived in Scarborough, West Hill, actually. And then his company moved to Mississauga. And it was, like, oh my God, way out in the boonies. And both of us grew up in Toronto. So, we were kind of used to the city, busy city. I had no problem leaving the city. That wasn't a problem. But I was working at Young in the 401. I was a special education teacher.
Okay.
And so I was still teaching at Young in 401. And I thought, well, that's not too bad, getting back and forward on the 401. So that was our foray into living in Mississauga. And we moved to the valleys. We looked at Meadowvale, but that was so far away.
It's right on the 401, though.
It was really in the country, So we settled in Mississauga Valleys, which was brand new at the time, new subdivision, all young people like us moving in. And so that was kind of our first entry into the city.
Did you go to the opening of Square One? That was 73, so the year after.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. And I remember the, before Square One was built, the horse farm. We used to enjoy watching the race horses that were thoroughbreds that were on the farm there.
So you talk about Square One, I'm talking about Ground Zero. You've seen Mississauga grow from Square One up. That's so from the valleys. When I know you're I don't know what the right word. You're known for Meadowvale, right? This is where you served, where you've lived, and the community you've helped build. When did Meadowvale become home?
78. We were in the valleys for 6 years. And it's funny because looking back, we look at house prices now and everyone talks about the economy. And looking back, we paid $29,000 for our home in the valleys. And at the time, that was a huge amount of money. I mean, we had this big giant mortgage and everything else. And looking back now, it's like, oh my gosh, couldn't even buy a car for that price that we bought a house for. But we moved to Meadowvale in 78, and we've been here ever since.
What drew you to Meadowvale? Out of curiosity, why leave the valleys for Meadowvale?
Well, we started having children.
Right.
We had our first son in 77.
Okay.
And we were in a small bungalow at the time, and we wanted to have more kids, so we thought, okay, we're going to need a larger house.
Right.
So that was really, where can we look? And at the time we thought, okay, and Ron's company was in Sheridan Research Center.
Okay. Yep.
So moving over to Meadowvale was a little bit closer. He just had to go south. But at the time I stopped working, so I wasn't driving back and forward into Toronto. So we were a little bit more flexible with with where we could live. And we looked at Erin Mills, we looked at Applewood, we looked at down along the QEW, Sheridan, and decided that, Meadowvale was more affordable for us at that
Right.
point in time.
Yep.
So we moved to Meadowvale.
And so you were in Meadowvale really, not right at the beginning, but certainly in those formative years of the community kind of expanding and developing. And
Yeah.
did you ever see yourself in having a hand in that?
Well, not as a politician.
Yeah.
I was a volunteer. As soon as we got to Meadowvale, I got roped into, and I do say roped into, working on the Meadowvale World.
Yep.
I have a degree in English, so I love reading, I love writing, that kind of thing. So when we were in the valleys, we were on the Residents Association,
Right.
and worked to build the community center, fundraise for the community center. And I did the Valley Echo newsletter that was sent out to the community. So when I moved to Meadowvale, I guess a few people, Barb Hammond in particular, knew that I had done that. So I got a call from Barb, and joined people like Edna Toth.
Right.
She was part of the Meadowvale World at the time, Jean DePrato, people like that. And so I very quickly got moved up from writing articles, doing interviews, that kind of thing, to being editor and publisher and layout artist and all that other stuff, photographer. So yeah, that was fun. But we had no resources in Meadowvale when we moved there.
Okay.
There were no programs, there was no community center, there were very few schools. And I remember calling the City of Mississauga and saying, can we get some of, we used to drive to Erin Mills,
Right.
to Brookmead for mom and tot programs, and newcomers programs, that kind of thing. And I kind of saw a need at that time for, mothers like me that were home with our kids, that we needed something to do other than take them to the park. That they needed some structure. So I said to the city, if, can you bring the programs? And they said, well, we don't have any facilities. If you can find us space, we'll provide the program. So I called the two churches, Eden United, the old building.
The old one, yep.
Original Eden United, and they said we could use the basement. And the Christian Reformed Church, as it was called then, Meadowvale Community Church now. And both of them said, yeah, we can give you space. So we ran the newcomers program and the mom and tots program. The city came in and did it. We ran it in those spaces until we built the community center.
You talk about those building blocks of a community, though, because we look at we have the new community center now, right? Like you saw the beginning of that change, but you saw the beginning of the old community center. So it's,
and I wasn't as involved in that fundraising because the Residents Association was already in place when we moved into Meadowvale. So we were kind of on the fringe of that. We participated in a lot of the things, but it was the people who had started the Residents Association a few years before that really got that fundraising going. I did get involved after that in the funding for the Meadowvale Theater and getting that built.
Mm-hmm.
So that was after the community center.
Can we reflect a little bit? I mean, I know we're talking Mississauga as a whole, but Meadowvale has its own unique timelines as well. And I know you're so in touch with it. Who are some of the kind of those milestone moments in Meadowvale that you saw, the development of this community? I mean, it's a mature community today, but it had a piecemeal beginning in a way, in the way the development progressed. And what about some of those earliest memories of Meadowvale? I know you've touched on some of them, the churches and community programs, but some of the other ones. I mean, the towns, the Meadowvale Town Center wasn't all that old.
No, it was just built, and that was our go-to place. That was where we went. We had a library. We did have a library because when the town center was built, there was a professional building built beside it, and the lower floor of that had a very small library.
Okay.
And that's where everyone saw everyone else. We would go to the library and it was really tiny. And the day after, I guess it was closed on Mondays. And so Tuesday evening, everybody was in the library. The lineup was stretching right through to the back of the library for checking out books. That was where you saw everybody. And I felt very bad because the kids had, the students had maybe 3 or 4 tables that were kind of in the middle,
Okay.
this open area, and they're trying to do their homework while the rest of us are catching up and trying to be quiet. But the library was a very special place at that time. And it was really, that was before the community center was built. So, you know, and the library really evolved after that. It's always been a meeting place. You know, in Meadowvale, we had the bookmobile when we first moved there. We lived up off Copenhagen, and the bookmobile was it was a Becker's Plaza at the time.
Yep.
And once a week, the bookmobile was up at the plaza, and that's where you would see everybody until they opened the library. So that was where we started, and then went to the professional building, and then when over to the mall, got the larger space in the Meadowvale Town Center, and then eventually, of course, the new building.
But I've been I live in Meadowvale now, but I didn't grow up in the community, and I reflect on some of the early pictures I see. I remember the amphitheater and the community gatherings.
Oh yes, yeah.
Like what about some of those evolutions in the community, perhaps that aren't with
On
us
those?
anymore, but were.
Yeah, well, you know, my husband and I chaired the committee to run the Laugh Festival every year, the Lake Aquitaine Family Festival, LAFF.
Okay.
And I still have the t-shirts. I know in my basement I have 1 or 2 of the little kitties. I'll have to give them to you for the
Sure.
for the archives. But they haven't been worn. They're old ones. So we ran the Lake Aquitaine Family Festival. We ran an annual fundraiser called Novemberfest
Okay.
at the community center, and that the very first event ever held at the Meadowvale Community Center was Novemberfest. And we sold, it was like an Oktoberfest kind of beer event. Okay. And we sold so many tickets that we had to move, we had to use the village room, the big room, plus every other room on the upper level of the community center. So the event was really spread out, and then people would just move around back and forward. And, you know, we gave every person that bought a ticket got a big beer stein with the year and the event on it. And so, you know, we have those heritage beer steins. Absolutely. From Novemberfest. Every fall we had the Catch a Crafty Critter, and Markburr Properties or Cadillac Fairview, whichever one decide to donate, they would stock Lake Aquitaine with fish, with trout.
Okay.
We didn't know back then that Lake Aquitaine was a bass lake. Okay. Not trout. So the trout went to the bottom, and 2 of the trout were marked with, I think it was $1,000 on one of them and 500 on the other. They were never caught. Of course. Nobody ever claimed the money that the developers put up, but everybody learned how to fish at Lake Aquitaine and skate.
And that's something that I saw a recent thing. There's a fishing day coming up, I think this weekend. Yeah, the province runs that. Okay. The province stepped in. Lake Aquitaine is actually a federal fishery, official fishing under the federal department. I don't know, fishery or whatever it's called. Agriculture. I'm not sure which one it is, but it is listed on the federal listings. So the province stepped up. Used to be the Credit Valley Anglers. Yep. Used to run that fishing every year, and then the province started running it and teaching people how to fish. So you've talked about these events that you did, these early events, Novemberfest, which sounds fabulous. It was fun. What I mean, you obviously became involved very early in kind of community and activity and stuff. Who were some of the other people? If you can give a kind of a hat tip to some of the people I remember you mentioned Edna Toth, but who are some of the other people that had a hand? Barb Hammond. Barb was very big on the Meadowvale world. I'm trying to think of some of the other people. As I mentioned, Jean DePrato. Yep.
We had our children around the same time, so we would have infants or toddlers as we were doing the Meadowvale World.
Right.
Linda, and I'm gone blank on Linda's last name.
That's okay.
Yeah, names are bad, the
It
older
is.
you get, the names go, right? Anyway, she was really the lead on the Meadowvale Theater,
Okay.
on the fundraising for the theater. We had people, who else did we have? Nahum Puri was with the Residents Association. Ted Southhorn, who was the former counselor,
Yeah.
he wasn't as involved as a volunteer, but Ken Deere, who was a counselor before Ted, was with the Residents Association. And I would probably have to go and pull out my old minutes that I still have some from some of the Meadowvale Residents Association meetings when Ron and I were on the board. I still have minutes there, but yeah, there were there were so many people that got involved either in a big way or a little way. And I'm totally blanked on the name of the person who ran the Crafty Critter.
Okay.
Ron and I didn't do that one. It was another resident who lived there who had access to a sporting company.
Okay.
And boats and things like that. So because we were allowed to go on boats on Lake Aquitaine at that time.
I've seen pictures of that.
Yeah. Oh, we had those wonderful little paddle boats.
Uh-huh.
And people launched their canoes and everything. Today it would be kayaks, but back then it was canoes. And the people like, who was our famous canoe? The man.
Aldershaw?
No.
Oldershaw? No.
No. He was with the Mississauga News as well.
Oh, Fred Luke. Anyway, I'm trying to blank well.
Anyway, anyway, the canoe club kept some of the canoes at Lake Aquitaine, and they did some of their practice out on the lake as well.
Oh, I think we should bring that back. That sounds awesome.
So I do too. And you know what? I tried for years to, Lake Aquitaine is a stormwater pond.
Yep.
And Barb Hammond, one year, one of our articles in the Meadowvale World, Barb was a scientist. Right. And she did a study. She did a water study on and revealed the fecal content that was in Lake Aquitaine.
Yeah.
And it was like, ew, the stuff that's in the lake is not very pretty. But
you don't want to go swimming.
No, you don't want to go swimming. You don't want to let your pets go swimming,
Yeah.
But but I mean, for skating and boating, as long as you don't fall in the water.
Yeah, true that. You mentioned a couple of the events there, but who were some of those early organizations and that kind of brought a positive impact to the community, whether it's Mississauga as a whole or Meadowvale specific, things that you were involved with or connected to? What were some of those?
Well, some of the organizations that were really key were the Lions Club and the Rotary.
Okay.
And they were involved in all of the big events. I was not on either one of them, but they were really, really involved. In any parades we held, in the festival themselves. Pretty well every organization, the sports organizations, the hockey association, baseball association. We didn't have the soccer back then. That wasn't big. So we had the baseball and we had the hockey. So those organizations were all engaged. We did every year we did a community exhibit, and the Residents Association organized it at the Meadowvale Town Center. Yeah. And all of the organizations in the community set up a table, and people could go through and they could find out about them. Right. So, we had all of that. The ones that I was involved in mainly was the Residents Association and the Meadowvale World, and working on those events. and working with the other organizations as a volunteer. Once I became councillor, I kind of expanded that to some of the others.
Yeah. But I mean, is there a direct link between the volunteer and running for office? I mean,
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I'm not a political person. I mean, quite frankly, I hate politics, and I've always said that. And it was never ever in my ever plans, it was never a goal to be a politician. And it was I was happy. I went to work for the city.
Okay.
When City Hall was being built and was opening, Ted Southorn, and I'd worked on Ted's campaign. That was my only foray into politics. But Ted came to me and he said he was he had already registered to run. And he came and he said to me then that there was an opening at City Hall for a staff position. It was a contract position as a tour guide. So he said it doesn't pay much, but if you want to get into marketing and this kind of thing and doing the events, because that I've been doing as a volunteer, doing them and getting paid for them, he said it's a good start. Well, I had young children at the time, so that, big consideration. So I thought, okay, I'm going to apply for it. We decided I would, and I got hired as a tour guide. And then my job kind of expanded. I was still a tour guide, but I was also expanded to be a public affairs officer pretty well right away. So I was organizing events on that side. I was doing writing newsletters. We did waste management at the city at the time. I did introduced a fire prevention program. There'd been absolutely nothing in fire prevention, zero, and they had no budget for it. So I found a small budget, got my boss to give a small budget. And I worked with the fire education officer, and we put together a fire prevention program that he took out, and I went with him, and we produced material and stuff. And then I got to organize the council meeting at the new City Hall when Hazel got her new chain of office.
Okay.
And that was an interesting little tidbit, because I had to worked with Terry Julian, Arthur Cranham. Was it Arthur or Terry? Arthur, the clerk at the time. And I had to provide a pillow for the chain of office. And Hazel loved anything gold. She likes sparkly gold.
Sparkly, yeah.
And he said to me, don't do gold, make it elegant. So I found this nice silver gray pillow, and I sat at home and I sewed silver tassels onto the pillow. And I took it in and I showed it to her, and I said, this, because the chain had silver pieces on it. So I said, I selected Mayor McCallie, and I selected this because it matches the chain. And oh yes, that's lovely, that's beautiful. So the clerk said to me, oh, thank God, you got her to it. Because the old pillow that we had at the city was very tacky. So that was my first big event. And then that same day when we opened City Hall, I was still doing tours, and we did a draw, and I got picked to do the tour with Prince Andrew and Sarah in the council chambers.
Okay.
And I'll always remember that was my 40th birthday that day. So it was very special. And I always remember Sarah was walking down. We were told you can't shake their hands. Well, they came over and shook hands with us, right? And hello, I'm Andrew. And I'll always remember that day, those special things that stay in your memory. When his wife was chatting all the way down, he said, well, my wife's going to be a little while, so let's just stand here and chat. So we did.
All right.
So that was an exciting day.
And then that transitions, obviously you've got an opening to run for council. And
as I said, Ted was still on council, and he came to me in 91, and he said he had some health issues and his doctor had advised him to not run again. So he called me on a Friday, And he said, if you ever want to run for council, you need to register on Monday and get your name. And this was in June of 1991.
Okay.
And it was, I think the elections were in November back then. So he said, you got to do it now. So I thought, okay, talked about it with my husband, like it never ever had popped into my head. And we decided, well, you know what, let's go for it, right? So I registered and ended up winning. And I really think I won because of my volunteerism. That's what I heard when I was going around doors, and I knocked on almost every door at the time. But when I was going around to the doors, people would say, well, we know you from the Residents Association, from the Meadowvale World. So you've earned this position. You've done your bit. So now let's get you on council.
That's kind of what I felt. I mean, I met you when you were already a councillor, but I always got that feeling that you were a homegrown councillor in that sense, where
I kind of was.
they knew you, they knew you through previous work, and yet here you are on council where you had a long term on council. Well, so 91 you're elected. You retired when from council?
2022, so 31 years.
31
nine
years.
nine terms. I figured I was representing Ward 9. I had to do 9 terms.
Fair enough.
9 is my magic number.
So, I mean, the changes you've seen, not only physically within the city, I mean, the growth has been astronomical in 31 years, I can imagine, but just also the evolution of council and the responsibility of the city has grown enormously in that time too.
Yeah, it has, when I came on council, Katie Mahoney and I came on at the same time. And we used to joke that we were the first immigrants to be elected to council. So she was from Manchester and I was from Belfast.
Right.
And we said, whoever would have thought, that 2 young women from very humble beginnings, would end up serving on council on, at the time, a city of about 250,000.
Right.
It wasn't. Well, no, it was probably closer to about 300,000 then when we were elected. But yeah, we saw immense growth and changes. We were in a good time. It was a good time to be on council because the city was booming. All of the green fields were getting built up. Meadowvale was expanding. Lisgar was being built. Central Air and Mills came along. A lot of the areas to the east, the filling in, were being done, but mostly it was to the west. And in George's ward and my ward, they were the big boom wards, which is why we ended up splitting them.
Right.
Because they more like when we split the ward, I had over 110,000 people in my ward, and so did George.
Yeah.
And I started with about 48,000. So, it really, you can tell where all the growth was at that point. But, council at the time, we had all of the surpluses. We had like 38 million surplus every year that we were putting into reserves. We didn't need to worry about raising taxes. We had money we were putting away. The developers, because we had development levies at the time.
Right.
Not the same as what is there today, but we had levies. People that wanted to build in Mississauga and they wanted to build were willing to pay a levy on every house. Plus Markborough and Cadillac Fairview built the parks, they built the trails.
Right.
So the city didn't have to pay for any of those. So, we didn't have the same financial pressures that we ended up having once we hit into, the later years.
Yeah.
We were able to weather quite a few storms because of those reserves and because of those surpluses, knowing that one day they would be gone.
Right.
And Hazel was a good leader in that because, she looked towards the future and she had this violent hate of debt. She never wanted the city to go into debt. So that was why putting the money away so we don't have to go into debt. We knew we eventually would.
Right.
But that, it was a good time. And councils changed over the years. We lost people like Frank McKechnie, Harold Kennedy, very solid. And they were they were the type of counselors that I really wanted to be like, because they were really involved in their community. You know, Harold would go out and he'd drive one of his citizens. She had to go get her hair done,
I remember
and
his
she
stories.
couldn't. Yeah, and Harold would drive her. You know, Frank McKechnie was, you know, the real gentleman on council. He would be out there. Everybody loved him. You know, so you had those people on council that as really, really good examples. And, you know, we were a lot of women on council.
Mhm.
You know, the women dominated council for many, many years.
Yep.
You know, it's kind of changed now. You know, it's changed over the years, but for the longest time, it was a very female-oriented council.
The time that you've lived in Mississauga, the time that you've lived in Meadowvale,
Mhm.
time as a counselor, are there developments might be the wrong word, but are there things that have happened that you're most proud of? You know, contributed the most to the sense of the community that has developed over time. It might be multiple
Yeah.
things, but I'm curious what you
Yeah.
reflect on when I ask that.
Well, I guess there's a couple that come to mind, and one of them is a building, actually, and that is the Gary Morden Fire Training Center. I'm extremely proud to have worked with Gary Morden, actually, to bring that center to the Meadowvale community. I visited a fire training center down in Georgia one year, and I was just so, they gave me a tour. I'd arranged to go on a tour, and I was just so impressed. And I came back and I met with Gary and I said, we have to build one of these in Mississauga. We had the old training center over on Britannia Road, which was like one little building in a factory area, and it was not very good. But so Gary really wanted to build one as well. And I said, and we need a driving track. And I have just the parcel of land for it. We had, which was kind of brings me to one of the other things I'm the most proud of. We'd been given the opportunity to buy about 300 acres of land along 9th Line on the 407, that strip along 9th Line. And the province was selling it. They offered it to Halton because it was actually in Halton at the time. They didn't want it. They offered it to the region of Peel, which was next in line. Region didn't want it. So I said, we have to buy it. Well, I had to really, really work to convince first staff and then council that we could use it for recreation for the new community of Churchill Meadows that was coming along.
Yep.
And we got it for $29,000 an acre.
Okay.
So the land is worth millions now.
Right.
But we couldn't sell it and make profit for 17 years. There was a covenant on it, so that was fine. We weren't planning on it anyway. But as part of it, the parcel where the Morden Center was part of that whole parcel. It was on the east side, but that was part of the land. So we looked at that one, and it was a little smaller than what we would have wanted, but it was more easily serviced than the land on the west side.
Right.
Which was a lot of floodplain land as well. So we worked on it and ended up building it. And then unfortunately, Gary developed cancer. And before he passed, I asked council if we could name it the Gary Morden Center. And he was able to be I'm going to cry on this one. Gary was able to come to the council meeting.
Right.
And the room was filled with firefighters.
Nice.
You know, they loved him.
Yeah.
And John McDougall was his deputy and a good friend of Gary's at the time. So he made sure that we carried on with it. And so, you know, that is the one that I think I'm the most proud of, because it's a very unique facility, trains police. I got the police to agree to pay for the track. I got National Defense to pay to, they wanted to, they approached us, and I met with the chief, whatever his name is, his title up in Ottawa, came down and convinced him that they should put the money in. So they put the money in to build that part of the building for the Scots, Tor Scots. And so it was a really good partnership. and we got it built, and so it's amazing. Buying that land, of course, now we've got Mattamy bought up some of the private land. We did a land swap with them because we took the parcel at the north end to expand our opportunity for recreation, and that's where the Bussel house is. There. So that's all part of our protected parcel of land that I would love to see that house become a small arts center of some sort in the future. So that's my hope for that one. And I guess the other was the development of Churchill Meadows. I had an opportunity, my first opportunity, to actually influence the design of an entire community, because the others I'd kind of inherited and had to, had to just manage them along. But Churchill Meadows, I wanted to be a transit-oriented development, and also putting in place crime prevention methods, eyes on the street. So that community is designed to be very walkable. It's probably the most walkable community in the city. I convinced council to put buses on right away. I convinced council to give the school boards veto power on development unless there was a school built. And our planning commissioner, Tom McCrisky at the time, oh boy, did he ream me out on that one. But council agreed to it. And it has worked really, really well, with the result that as those kids moved into Churchill Meadows, as the developments were being built, the developers built the schools ahead of time.
Okay.
And we left it in place. It's actually still in place today across the city, and has never been a problem. But we've been getting the schools built without having the existing schools overburdened.
Right.
And that community, I had traffic calming built in. So the developers built roundabouts and chicanes and all kinds of traffic calming throughout the community. So it's a model community in that way. I did a presentation at the Making Cities Livable conference one year on it, and showed this new unique development. Plus, it's a grid system.
Right.
And if you look at Meadowvale, we're so far from a grid.
I remember one of my most fascinating conversations. I had a chance to talk to Macklin Hancock, who had a hand in designing Meadowvale many years ago.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And he talked exactly about that. I guess we call it the anti-grid.
The anti-grid.
And how it was all about how you viewed as you went to work and came home from work and all that.
I ended up having to have staff put street numbers at the intersections of roads like Montevideo and Wynwood.
Oh, yes.
Especially Montevideo.
Yep.
Because it crossed itself so many times and so many roads. And there were many times before GPS was really popular, I would get so lost. And I'd go on the wrong entrance of Montevideo, and I would travel the entire road. So I said, we need street numbers up there.
You'll get a laugh at this. My wife grew up in Meadowvale, but after we got married, I moved up to Meadowvale myself, and I wasn't that familiar with the community. And I was on Montevideo, and all of a sudden, I'm turning onto Montevideo. How?
Yes. Oh yeah, it's an adventure. Well, think about what our bus service was like when we moved into Meadowvale.
Yeah.
It was a scenic route because the bus would meander all around through all those streets, and it would take over an hour just for the bus to go from Meadowvale Town Center down to Square One. It went through Streetsville on the way.
You get to see a lot of the city as it grows.
Oh, we went through the country. We drove through farms. It was an adventure. Yeah.
So when we spent time looking back, and we can spend hours looking back, I realize that it's such a treasured way to reflect on a community that you've had such a hand in. And we're also going to link to this. You gave a presentation, a wonderful talk at the recent Heritage Mississauga AGM, and that video is actually up online. We're going to link to that as well, so people want to share more of your memories. We'll connect to that. But we'll end on a question of
Yeah.
prognostication. And, if you had a wish or a hope that the city will develop, or what will happen with the city over the next 50 years,
Yeah.
what might it be, or what might many things be for that view of the city 50 years from now?
Well, I guess I've always been focused on road safety and personal community safety.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to see our roads become a lot safer. I'm a big proponent of Vision Zero, of a gentle Vision Zero. I want to say that because some of the Vision Zero mandates are a little stronger than what I think are reasonable. So I think what we developed as Vision Zero in the city is reasonable. I'm disappointed that I'm not seeing it being implemented as much as it should, because there's a lot of pressure, and I know there's a lot of pressure on councillors to not make those changes, to not do the things that actually will make the streets safer.
Right.
And it's hard. It's hard to do them. But I would hope that there are enough people that have come on council who really believe in making safe streets, that are going to stand up and say, look, this is what needs to be done. Otherwise, we're going to continue having people injured and killed on our roads, and it's not acceptable. So that's a big one. Getting the community engaged more in crime prevention. There's a lot more that can be done, and it's not just, there seems to be a lot of focus on cars being stolen, but there's a heck of a lot more to crime prevention than protecting vehicles. That's property. Crime prevention emanates beyond that, and it's the smaller things that really eat into the soul of a community. So I really want to see, I would love to see council fund Safe City Mississauga a lot more. Too much over the years, there was discussion about removing their funding, reducing their funding. I think I think that's a very short-sighted thing to do, because if you don't have a safe community, you're not going to have people continue to live here. You're going to have people leave. You're not going to have new people move in. So you can build all the houses you want, but people, when they're buying a house, they want a place that's safe.
Yeah.
They want their children to be safe. They want to be able, if it's a single woman, she wants to be able to walk to the bus stop at night and be safe. She wants good lighting. She wants safe streets, designed to be safe streets. So I think there's a lot more that can be done there. I think as development, we need more development, but I would hate to see it, as it has been over the last 5 years, all go into tall apartment buildings, because you're putting people into tiny little boxes, and those units are getting smaller and smaller.
They are.
And they're not necessarily affordable. So you're putting people into these tall boxes, into small boxes inside them, with a little bit of green space outside. I think there's a way of developing and providing housing that is a more gentle way, the lower rise, the 6-story, even 12-story. We have one that's just been built on Battleford that's almost completed. I'm so proud of that building because it's absolutely gorgeous on the outside. Fits into the community. The developer was really great to work with. He didn't come forward and say, I want a 25, 30-story building, although others have for Meadowvale. That doesn't fit in Meadowvale.
Right.
So, you can go with the 12-story, and in some places you can go with the 15-story. Down around Erin Mills Town Center, you can go taller because you've got, it's a different setting.
Right.
You don't have the houses up close. New housing has to be compatible. It has to be compatible with the community. It has to fit into the community, and you can do that. You can erase NIMBYism by working with the community, which we've done in Meadowvale. And we have a plan for Meadowvale for the intensification. The plan is there and it was done with the community. Now it just has to get built. And that's how housing should be done. Because once you get the buy-in from the people that are living there, then everything else is seamless.
Right.
And you get new people moving into a community that is really welcoming them.
And maybe that, that's probably the core. I think I would argue, or I would say that, crime prevention and safe communities are hand in hand with building good communities and building,
Yes.
and supporting the rise of good citizenship and involvement in your community. I think,
Yeah,
they're all the same coin,
yeah,
right? And
they are.
I
There's
just,
just such an overlap,
yeah,
and if you get one and then it rolls into the other, and people looking out for their neighbors,
very much so, yeah.
and we've always had that in Meadowvale. I find in Meadowvale that by and large, even when I've taken something that was, maybe not as, didn't make people as happy, like the reducing before we went to 40 kilometers on the internal streets. I had a road where we had a lot of collisions, and it was people driving too fast and they were hitting fences and trees, at night.
Yeah. Okay.
So the community that lived on that street asked for the speed limit to be reduced. Well, I sent it out to every person, every street that came off Miller's Grove, and asked for their opinion. And one that, some people said, well, it's going to add a few minutes to my time. And I said, so leave a few minutes earlier, like a few minutes. Come on.
Yeah.
Like
Really.
how selfish can you be? These people are having their fences wiped out. And one lady said to me, and this one really struck me. She said, I don't really like the idea of the speed limit being 40, being reduced, because it's going to add a little bit more inconvenience to me. But then she said, if it will keep my neighbors safer, then I'm in support.
Yeah.
And I thought that's the attitude that I would love to see more people see. It's too much. How's it going to affect me?
Right.
On my drive to work or my drive to the GO station. It's this thing, oh, there's going to be congestion, it's going to be a nightmare and everything else. And well, you could leave a little bit earlier or a little bit later, and think of the people who live there, how it affects them.
Good neighbors build good neighborhoods.
They do. They really, really do. And we need to really, really stress that, I think, a lot more.
Yeah. Well, I would I know you've had an involvement in Meadowvale since 1977, 78, right?
78. Yeah.
And you've helped shape the community, the identity of the community, and in that sense, I think we have had a tremendous hand in building people who have connected to this place, called it home for years, if not generations now, and
Yeah.
and love it. And those are the good backbones of a city, right? That's
They are.
citizenship. And so I would say kudos to you and thank you for the work that you've done. But the vision for the city doesn't stop. And
No.
we're here. We are the 50th anniversary, but we're nowhere near the end story. So it's
Well, Matthew, I just want to end by saying that one of the things that I think we should be stressing at the 50th anniversary, we highlight the original villages.
yes.
And the city's really good at doing that, saying we started here, and that's great. But that's not what built the city.
No.
It's the new communities from the 70s on.
Yeah.
The valleys, Erin Mills, Meadowvale, River Grove. I mean, all of the people who came here, and a lot of them were young people with young families. As you say, it became generational. And Central Erin Mills, a lot of the people that settled there, that's what built the city of Mississauga. Because if those homes had not been built, if those areas we wouldn't be sitting here
Absolutely.
celebrating a big city 50 years later.
Well, you look at, I mean, the thing to explore, of course, you mentioned earlier Mark Burrow and Cadillac Fairview and
Yeah,
Mills Development Corps and
McLaughlin. Yeah,
McLaughlin and even before them, the Ship family
Dip.
and just, they all
Yeah,
had their hands in this thing that becomes Mississauga.
they
Uh,
did.
but it's the guiding hand of council, I think, that unites it in a way too. So, to you and to your predecessors,
Yeah.
job well done for the last 50 years. And
Well, thank you. And
but
I have confidence that we have a young council now. They have a lot to learn.
yep.
Half of council are new.
It,
They're still just, I mean, most of them are just over a year on council.
yep.
And there's a couple that have only been there for, just over one term, not
Yep.
even quite 2 terms yet. So, you've got a relatively new council there.
Yep.
And they still have a lot to learn. I'll say that from my aged wisdom. Everybody comes in really gung ho and they want to do this, this, and this. Well, you need to take a step back and learn
Yep.
the foundations first, and then start implementing, those new ideas, which is absolutely amazing. I mean, we all came in with new ideas.
Yep.
Every council has brought something new to building the city. And it's different times and different ages that are coming into the city now, but when you look at it, those were the same ages that we were catering to back in the 1990s and the 1970s.
Yep.
It was the young people that we wanted to attract to Mississauga back then, the young families to build their homes there. So
Well, you had referenced in 1991, you and Katie being the new ones on council, and
yeah.
part of the series will reach out to Katie as well. And
Oh,
but
good.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
But
we were the rookies according to Hazel.
But I'm somebody who studies history, and I've looked at, past councils over the years and even back before the town was formed.
Yeah.
The past 2 election cycles, since your retirement, and then obviously now with the by-elections that have gone in, we have seen more change at the council level than ever
Yes.
before in our history.
Yes,
It's
we have.
astounding, actually, when you think of it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, we have with with George and me retiring,
Yep.
and then Ward 2 was open,
Yep.
and then Ward 6, the
Yep.
changeover in Ward
Yep.
6
Yep.
with Ron losing to Joe. That was the biggest change we'd had in a long
Yep.
time.
Yeah, it just, but they have a solid foundation, and you have optimism, which is fantastic for the future growth. But that foundation comes through the years of hard work that you and your predecessors have put in for over that 50-year
Yeah.
period. And
Having the history helps, and I mean, I know Martin will, he'll ask me every now and then. I think he's doing a good job, but he'll call and say, "What's the history on this?" I'm meeting with so and so. What's the history? So, you can't replicate that history.
no.
You can't. It's there. I mean, and it's very helpful.
Yeah, and again, we come back to that whole thing. It helps build a good city and a good foundation
Yeah.
for future growth. So,
Yeah.
uh, with that, Pat, thank you so much for spending time with us, for wandering down memory lane with us.
It was
Um,
fun.
but this is fantastic, and just
Yeah.
you've always been someone when you're at council. I've always admired you and enjoyed our conversations, enjoyed working with you on many community
Thank you.
projects, and thank you, and wishing you all the best, and enjoy this 50th anniversary. I know it's not been a quiet year, so
No. No.
but thank you so much for spending some time with us here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it, Matthew.
Thank you for spending some time with us here on Ask a Historian. And thank you also to former councillor Pat Saito for sharing moments and milestones with us for the City of Mississauga's 50th anniversary. Like, subscribe, and follow us, and we will see you on future episodes of Ask a Historian with Heritage Mississauga.